ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। नारायणं नमस्कृत्य नरं चैव नरोत्तमं देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं ततो जायमुदीरयेत्। नष्टप्रायेषु अभद्रेषु नित्यं भागवत सेवया भगवतीरुत्तमश्लोके भक्तिर्भवति नैष्टिकी। ॐ अज्ञानतिमिरन्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूपकदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकम्। नमो विष्णुपादाय कृष्णप्रेष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्त स्वामिनिति नामिने। नमस्ते सरस्वते देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्यदेशतारिणे। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभो नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद। हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। Hare Krishna. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam. By His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. We are reading from Canto 4, Chapter 19, King Pruthu's 100 Horse Sacrifices. We are in the section, text 1 to 9, where there is performance of Ashwamedh Yagya by Maharaj Pruthu is being described. And within there, text 3 to 9, it is described how Pruthu's sacrifice excelled Indra's sacrifice. Right. So, by the appearance of Lord Vishnu personally being present there, other exalted personalities, and various gifts being offered, sacrifice performed by Prithu Maharaj was by far superior to the sacrifices performed by Indra. So, we are at text 4 now. अन्वितो ब्रह्मशर्वाभ्यां लोकपालैः सह गुणैः उपगीयमानो गन्धर्वै मुनिभिश्च अप्सरोगणैः. Translation.
Lord Vishnu appeared in the sacrificial arena. Lord Brahma, Lord Shiva, and all the chief predominating personalities of every planet, as well as their followers, came with him. When he appeared on the scene, the residents of Gandharva Loka, the great sages, and the residents of Apsara Loka all praised him. Hare Krishna.
So the presence of Lord Vishnu personally there in the sacrificial arena, Lord Brahma, Lord Shiva, Gandharva, Munis, and many great personalities, they appeared when the performance of Yajna was going on. And all of them, they praised the Supreme Lord, praised Him. Whom Him? The Supreme Lord they praised. H capital, look at the H capital there. Okay. So they praised the Supreme Lord Vishnu who was present in this particular Yajna. Text 5. Siddha Vidyadhara Daitya Danava Guhyakadayah Sunandananda Pramukha Parshada Prabharaharehe. Translation.
Translation: The Lord was accompanied by the residents of Siddhaloka and Vidyadhara Loka, all the descendants of Diti and the demons and the yakshas. He was also accompanied by his chief associates headed by Sunanda and Nanda. Hare Krishna.
So whole personalities they were there with the Supreme Lord. There were Siddhalokas, the personalities from the Siddhalokas. Then there are Vidyadhara Lokas, Daityas. Daityas are the descendants of Diti. We know that Kashyapa Muni, he has two wives, Diti and Aditi. Diti, from Aditi comes the demigods, and from Diti comes the Daitya, the sons of the Diti. They also appeared. Nanda Sunanda Pramukha, his chief associates, headed by Sunanda and Nanda, they also appeared. And Sunanda and Nanda had previously also appeared in Srimad Bhagavatam, right? There is a story of Dhruva Maharaj. So, so these personalities are there, and we are going to meet all these personalities with the progressive devotional service. So all these personalities they appeared along with the Supreme Lord. Text 6. Kapilo Narado Datto Yogesha Sanakadayah Tamanviyuh Bhagavata ye cha tatsevanotsukaah. Translation.
Great devotees who were always engaged in the service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, as well as the great sages named Kapila, Narada, Dattatreya, and masters of mystic powers, headed by Shanaka Kumara, all attended the great sacrifice with Lord Vishnu. Hare Krishna.
So great personalities like Kapila, Narada, Dattatreya. Okay. So appearance of Dattatreya we have seen. And then the masters of all mystic powers, they also appeared. And what is headed by Sanat Kumar, Chatush Kumar, they also appeared. All attended the great sacrifice with Lord Vishnu. And beautiful word here is Tat Sevako and Utsava. So Sevaka Utsava means those who are very eager to perform devotional service. So this is the qualification of a devotee, that they are always eager to perform devotional service. Tat Sevaka Utsaka. So one can actually judge one's advancement by this one criteria, that how eager I am to perform devotional service. This is one very important criteria. Of course, while taking care of everything, while being age appropriate, but there has to be the eagerness to perform devotional service. That's Sevakotsava. Text 7. Yatra dharmadugha bhumi sarvakamadugha sati dogdhisma abhisiptan arthan yajamanasya bharata. Translation.
My dear Vidura, in that great sacrifice, the entire land came to be like the milk producing Kamadhenu, and thus by the performance of Yajna, all daily necessities for life were supplied. Purport. In this verse, the word Dharmadugha is significant, for it indicates Kamadhenu. Kamadhenu is also known as Surabhi. Surabhi cows inhabit the spiritual world, and as stated in Brahma Samhita, Lord Krishna is engaged in tending these cows. Surabhir Palayantam. One can milk a Surabhi cow as often as one likes, and the cow will deliver as much milk as one requires. Milk, of course, is necessary for the production of so many milk products, especially clarified butter, which is required for the performance of great sacrifices. Unless we are prepared to perform the prescribed sacrifices, our supply of the necessities of life will be checked. Bhagavad Gita confirms that Lord Brahma created human society along with Yajna, the performance of sacrifice. Yajna means Lord Vishnu, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and the sacrifice means working for the satisfaction of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In this age, however, it is very difficult to find qualified Brahmanas who can perform sacrifices as prescribed in Vedas. Therefore, it is recommended in Srimad Bhagavatam, Yajna Sankirtana Praye, that by performing Sankirtana Yajna and by satisfying the Yajna Purusha, Lord Chaitanya, one can derive all the results derived by great sacrifices in the past. King Prithu and others derived all the necessities of life from the earthly planet by performing great sacrifices. Now, this Sankirtana movement has already been started by the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. People should take advantage of this great sacrifice and join in the society's activities. Then there will be no scarcity. If Sankirtana Yajna is performed, there will be no difficulty, not even in the industrial enterprises. Therefore, this system should be introduced in all spheres of life, social, political, industrial, commercial, etc. Then everything will run very peacefully and smoothly.
So now he says, my dear Vidura is addressed here as Bharata, Maitreya Muni, saying, in this great sacrifice, the entire land came to be known as milk producing Kamadhenu. What that means is that everything that was required from the land was given, and therefore she is Dharma Dugha Bhumi. Bhumi only became Kamadhenu. And thus, by this yagya, all daily necessities for the life were supplied. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada explains, Dharma Dugha That means Kamadhenu, and that means Surabhi. And such millions and millions of Surabhis are there in the spiritual world, especially the Golok Vrindavan. Venum Kwanantam Aravinda Dalayaksham Barhavatan Samastambuda Sundarangam. Not this one. which is this? Surabhir Abhipalayantam Govindama. Which is this word? Lakshmi Sahastra Shatasambrama Sevyamanam Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Pasham. So the spiritual world is famous for these Surabhi cows and the Kalpa Vriksha trees. Right. What is the difference between the ordinary trees and Kalpa Vriksha? Kalpa Vriksha can give you anything and everything. And same is the Surabhi cow. And then Srila Prabhupada explains the importance of milk, clarify butter in performance of yagya. But in Kali Yuga, these yagyas are not very effective. Why? Because there is a want of the Brahmanas, who are qualified Brahmanas, who can exhibit the result of yagya. And therefore, Kali Yuga means there is only one yagya. Yagyai Sankirtana Prayai Yajantihi Sumerasaha. That Sankirtana yagya, which is inaugurated by Sankirtanaika Pitarau Kamalaya by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Nityanand Prabhu, they inaugurated this Sankirtan yagya, and they are the Yagya Purusha, Lord Chaitanya. Then Prabhupada describes that how this yagya is very, very important to perform the Sankirtana everywhere. And without difficulty, Prabhupada writes here, even in the industrial enterprise, social, political, commercial enterprise, this yagya should be, the system of yagya should be involved, and then things will run very peacefully and very, very smoothly. Right. I know one devotee, he has a small company, startup, and he says that, Prabhuji, whenever I chant my rounds very well, my business also goes very well that day. Things are in control. But when I neglect my chanting, because it's like a one-man company, and then he just gets up with the calls and sleeps with the call, customer, this and that. Somehow the focus is not on setting up the systems, focus is simply on remaining busy, and that's what he's becoming busy. So, but then his wonderful realization is, this realization. To the degree I focus on my chanting the holy names, to that degree my day also goes quite smoothly. Otherwise, things are, completely haywire and topsy-turvy. So this is very important. Prabhupada writes there that, the material well-being automatically follows spiritual well-being. Right. Of course, one has to do one's spiritual duties, but it is very important that one has to do one's material duties, but it's very important that spiritual duties also should be very well performed. So there are two extremes here. Sometimes, in one extreme, people completely neglect spiritual material duties, and they say that, oh, Krishna will take care of me. Then they need some counseling. Sometimes there is another extreme where people are so busy in everything, earning well for the families, having a good family life, taking studies of the children, everything, but they don't have time for chanting. Or chanting is happening, all distracted way, and, with all other things. So one has to strike a very good balance, age appropriate balance, and one has to perform. But it is very important to give spiritual life as the top priority. Text 8. ऊहु सर्वरसान् नद्यः क्षीरदधि अन्नघोरसान् तरवो भूरिवर्ष्माणः प्रासुयन्तः मधुच्युतः. Translation.
The flowing rivers stripped all kinds of tastes, sweet, pungent, sour, etc. And very big trees supplied fruit and honey in abundance. The cows, having eaten sufficient green grass, supplied profuse quantities of milk, curd, clarified butter, and similar other necessities. Purport. If rivers are not polluted and are allowed to flow in their own way, or sometimes allowed to flood the land will become very fertile and able to produce all kinds of vegetables, trees, and plants. The word rasa means taste. Actually, all rasas are tastes within the earth, and as soon as seeds are sown in the ground, various trees sprout up to satisfy our different tastes. For instance, sugarcane provides its juices to satisfy our taste for sweetness, and oranges provide their juices to satisfy our taste for mixture of sour and the sweet. Similarly, there are pineapples and other fruits. At the same time, There are chilies to satisfy our taste for pungency. Although the earth's ground is the same, different tastes arise due to different kinds of seeds. As Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita 7.10, Bijamam Sarva Bhutanam. Bijamam Sarva Bhutanam. I am the original seed of all existences. Therefore, all arrangements are there. And as stated in Ishopanishad, Purnamidam, complete arrangements for the production of all the necessities of life are made by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. People should therefore learn how to satisfy the Yagna Purusha, Lord Vishnu. Indeed, the living entity's prime business is to satisfy the Lord because the living entity is part and parcel of the Lord. Thus, the whole system is so arranged that the living entity must do his duty as he is constitutionally made. Without doing so, all living entities must suffer. That is a law of nature. The words Saravo Bhuri Varsmanaha indicate very luxuriously grown, big bodied trees. The purpose of these trees was to produce honey and varieties of fruit. In other words, the forest also has its purpose in supplying honey, fruit, and flowers. Unfortunately, in Kali Yuga, due to an absence of yagna, there are many big trees in the forest, but they do not supply sufficient fruits and honey. Thus, everything is dependent on the performance of yagna. The best ways to perform yagna in this age is to spread Sankirtana movement all over the world. Thank you, Prabhu.
So now it is being explained that how various gifts were offered in that sacrifice by Dharmadugha Bhumi. At flowing rivers, they supplied all kinds of taste. Very big trees supplied fruit and honey in abundance. And the cows, they supplied milk, curd, clarified butter, and similar other necessities. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada elaborately explains that how the trees, if they are not polluted, if they are allowed to flow on their own and allowed to flood the land at times, all three things, then what will happen is the land will become very, very fertile. Right. In the name of controlling, we are so severely controlling the flow of the river that literally the river becomes extinct in particular months, and other times it is flooding, and it is very, very artificial system, which is actually affecting the productivity of the earth. Right. And to increase the productivity of earth, then we inject the chemicals in terms of the fertilizers, and that worsens the problem. And that's what we see, that those who are like very southern Krishi district, very those who are like place in particularly most of the Punjab, in Kolhapur, there are certain districts, certain talukas which are very famous for Krishi Utpanna. The farmers being very rich, they have a phenomenal rate of cancer there. Why? Because of too much of fertilizers. So further, Srila Prabhupada explains that how different tastes are being provided by Mother Earth. And although the earth is same, different tastes come from Mother Earth. And this is the reason is the potency of the Supreme Lord, Bijam Mam Sarva Bhutana, is the original seed of all the existence. Right. Thus we can see there is complete arrangement made by the Supreme Lord for the complete maintenance of the living entity. Om Purnamadam Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate. And this is the perfect and complete arrangement by the Supreme Lord. And therefore, a living entity should be grateful and offer yagya to the Supreme Lord and satisfy yagya purusha. Without doing so, Prabhupada says, all living entities must suffer. And then what happens is that who is supposed to do this? Actually, the human beings are supposed to do this. But if human beings neglect this duty, then who suffers? Then all living entities suffer. The animals cannot do yagya, but only humans can do. But when humans do yagya, even animals are benefited. And without this yagya, everybody has to suffer, and that is the law of material nature. Further, Srila Prabhupada explains that there are Taravo Bhuri Varshmanaha, that very luxuriously grown big-bodied trees giving abundantly fruits and honey. Right. But unfortunately, because there is no more yagya, the big trees are there in the forest, but not like they are abundantly producing fruits and honey. So the abundance will come whenever there is yajna. It is very important. Prabhupada said that what I had said that I was an old man sitting in Tompkinson Square Park, simply chanting 3 hours every day the holy names. And by this Sankirtan Yajna, entire ISKCON was established. And therefore Yajna is very important for for everyone. Text 9. सिन्धवो रत्ननिकरान् गिरयो अन्न चतुर्विधम् उपायनम् उपाजहुः सर्वे लोक सपालकाः. Translation.
King Prithu
King
was
Prithu.
presented with. Sorry, Prabhuji, go ahead.
King Prithu was presented with various gifts from the general populace and predominating deities of all planets. The oceans and seas were full of valuable jewels and pearls, and the hills were full of chemicals and fertilizers. 4 kinds of edibles were produced profusely. Purport. As stated in Ishopanishad, this material creation is supplied with all the potencies for the production of all necessities required by the living entities, not only human beings but animals, reptiles, aquatics, and trees. The oceans and seas produce pearls, coral, and valuable jewels so that fortunate law abiding people can utilize them. Similarly, the hills are full of chemicals so that when rivers flow down from them, the chemicals spread all over the fields to fertilize the 4 kinds of foodstuffs. These are technically known as charvya, those edibles which are chewed, leya, those which are licked up, chusya, those which are swallowed, and peya, those which are drunk. Prithu Maharaj was greeted by the residents of other planets and their presiding deities. They presented various gifts to the king and acknowledged him as the proper type of king by whose planning and activities everyone throughout the universe could be happy and prosperous. It is clearly indicated in this verse that the oceans and seas are meant for producing jewels, but in Kali Yuga, the oceans are mainly being utilized for fishing. Shudras and poor men were allowed to fish, but the higher classes like the Kshatriyas and Vaishyas would gather pearls, jewels, and coral. Although poor men would catch tons of fish, they would not be equal in value to one piece of coral or pearl. In this age, so many factories for the manufacture of fertilizers have been opened. But when the personality of Godhead is pleased by the performance of yajnas, the hills automatically produce fertilizing chemicals, which help produce edibles in the fields. Everything is dependent on the people's acceptance of the Vedic principles of sacrifice. Hare Krishna.
Now here it is, King Prithu was presented with various gifts from the general populace. So general people, Lokaha, Sapalakaha, those who are the predominating deities of the planets. The oceans and the seas and the hills and the 4 kinds of edibles were produced profusely. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada explains that how there is a complete arrangement to take care of the living entity completely. Srila Prabhupada quotes the Ishopanishad verse, that Om Purnamada Purnamidam. And then the complete arrangement also includes the complete arrangement for production, that is that of fertilizers. So previously and now also, when the trees run over through the hills, they will carry a lot of minerals and fertilizers. And this is how naturally the land will be made fertile. And then there are 4 types of foodstuffs were available. Charvya, charvan karna, lehya, one who is to be licked up, chusna, one is to be swallowed, and peya, to be drunk. All these chaturvidham food were made available. And then further, Srila Prabhupada explains that what is the duty of the king. The proper king is, Prithu Maharaj was greeted by the residents of all other planets and their presiding deities. And he was presented with different types of valuable gifts. And then there is a discussion on oceans and seas. and oceans and seas are meant for producing jewels. But currently, oceans and seas are meant only for catching the fish. And Prabha says, as your own buddhi is typically the Kali Yuga intelligence, you will go for the fish and you will let go the jewels and pearls. Now, it is not the point that we will have that gotakhor dubki lagata hai and finds the jewels from inside. That is not the point here. The point is that by pleasing the Supreme Lord, by being aware of the ecology, by being aware of the environment, one pleases the personality of ocean god, right? Varuna Dev. And Varuna Dev makes all these valuables abundantly available. Instead, in Kali Yuga, what we do is that we'd go for something very superficial and which is of no value. Prabhupada says the tons of fish cannot equal to even one piece of coral or a pearl, right? In the value. So people will say, no, this is for eating. Okay, that's a completely different discussion according to the Vedic perspective. There is a completely different discussion on that. Right. So the point here is when the Supreme Lord is pleased by the performance of yajna, then all the necessities of the life they are abundantly produced. And thus everything is dependent on people's acceptance on this Shastra Praman, the Vedic principles of sacrifice. And again, the sacrifice has become very simple in this age. Yagyai Sankirtana Praye Yajantehi Sumedasaha. That very simple sacrifice of clapping one's hands and chanting the holy names. Text 10. Now from text 10 to 25, here comes Indra, who is going to steal the sacrificial horse and is create different kinds of impediments later, which went on to become different apasampradaya. So this is the second section of this chapter. Text 10 to 25. King Indra steals sacrificial horse. चरमेण अश्वमेधेन यजमाने यजुःपतिं वैन्ये यज्ञपशुं स्पर्धन् अपोवाह तिरोहितः. Translation? Oh, sorry, I read 11th. Text 10. इति च अधोक्षजैषस्य पृथोस्तु परमोदयम् असूयन् भगवान् इन्द्र प्रतिघातम् अचीकरत्. Translation?
King Prithu was dependent. Sorry,
Yes,
Mataji,
go ahead. Go ahead.
King Prithu was dependent on the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is known as Adhokshaja. Because King Prithu performed so many sacrifices, he was superhumanly enhanced by the mercy of the Supreme Lord. King Prithu's opulence, however, could not be tolerated by the King of Heaven, Indra, who tried to impede the progress of his opulence. Purport. In this verse, there are three significant purposes expressed in the words Adhokshaja, Bhagwan Indra, and Pratho. Maharaj Prithu is an incarnation of Vishnu, yet he is a great devotee of Lord Vishnu. Although an empowered incarnation of Lord Vishnu, he is nonetheless a living entity. As such, he must be a devotee of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Although one is empowered by the Supreme Personality of Godhead and is an incarnation, he should not forget his eternal relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In this Kali Yuga, there are many self-made incarnations, rascals, who declare themselves to be the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The words Bhagwan Indra indicate that a living entity can even be as exalted and powerful as King Indra, or even King Indra, for even King Indra is an ordinary living entity in the material world and possesses the four defects of the conditioned soul. King Indra is described herein as Bhagwan, which is generally used in reference to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In this case, however, King Indra is addressed as Bhagwan because he has so much power in his hands. Despite his becoming Bhagwan, He is envious of incarnation of God, Prithu Maharaj. The defects of material life are so strong that due to contamination, King Indra becomes envious of an incarnation of God. We should try to understand, therefore, how a conditioned soul becomes fallen. The opulence of King Prithu was not dependent on material conditions. As described in this verse, he was a great devotee of Adhokshaja. The word Adhokshaja indicates the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is beyond the expression of mind and words. However, the Supreme Personality of Godhead appears before the devotee in his original form of eternal bliss and knowledge. The devotee is allowed to see the Supreme Lord face to face, although the Lord is beyond the expression of our senses and beyond our direct perception. Hare Krishna.
King Prithu was dependent on the Supreme Lord Adhokshaja, and he performed many great sacrifices and thus became superhumanly enhanced by the mercy of the Supreme Lord. And looking at this opulence of Maharaj Prithu, King Indra, the king of the heaven, became very envious. Pratighatam Achikarat. Pratighatam tried to create some vigna. Achikarat attempted multiple times. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada explains that there are three significant purposes expressed here by the words Adhokshaja, Bhagavan Indraha, and Prithu. So the first is that to know that when a devotee is empowered, he should not misunderstand oneself as the Supreme. And Prithu Maharaj is empowered incarnation by Supreme. He is a Shaktiavesh avatar. But he did not forget his relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Jivera Swarupa hai Krishnera Nityadas. While this was true for Maharaj Prithu, Indra, it acted exactly opposite. Indra was also empowered. That Indra is empowered personality. But Indra began to think himself as a Bhagavan. And this Bhagavan Indra, so Bhagavan is a little sarcastically being used for Indra here. This Bhagavan Indra, who was extremely powerful, he began to impede the sacrifice which is meant to please the Supreme Lord Vishnu, who has only empowered him. By being envious, what did Indra do? By being envious, Indra is trying to impede the sacrifice, pratighatam, achikarat. And the sacrifice is for the pleasure of his own master, who only made him Bhagavan or extremely powerful. And therefore, Prabhupada writes here, one should never become envious. However powerful one becomes, he will never overcome the four defects of the existence, and thus he became envious of the Supreme Lord. So here the important thing is, that punar mushtika bhava. That if we are not grateful to those who have raised us in our spiritual life, what happens is there is always a tendency that the lower nature will come up and take over us, our sense of good viveka and everything, and we will just become. Indra became a chore, right? Bhagavan Indra, what did he become? He just became a horse, goda chore, like that. Indra was reduced to. And this is how Srila Prabhupada concludes. The devotee is allowed to see the person. And then the Lord is Adhokshaja, third part Prabhupada says. Adhokshaja means beyond material manifestation, but the Lord makes himself available to the devotees, and the devotee can see the Lord face to face. So we will conclude here and continue tomorrow. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Gaura Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Thank you, Prabhupada. Thank you, everyone. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhupada. Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhupada.
Prabhu,
Thank you,
thank you.
Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhupada. Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Prabhupada. Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.